I'd like to welcome everyone to the final plenary of this AAAR meeting. My name is Cliff Davidson from Syracuse University, and I have the great pleasure of introducing an individual who has probably devoted more time and energy to AAAR over the past 4 decades than any other individual. I am talking about a most talented aerosol researcher who has shaped the field of aerosol science while at the same time shaping our organization, Dr. Susanne Herring. Susanne founded the research firm Aerosol Dynamics in 1991, and it has thrived since then. She is known for her work in developing water-based condensation methods for counting particles, as opposed to previous condensation nuclei counters that used butanol and other working fluids. She also developed a thermal desorption gas chromatography system in calibration with the University of California to enable analysis of organic matter in atmospheric aerosols. Not only has Susanne shaped AAAR, but she has also studied the history of our organization. And at this meeting, the 40th anniversary of AAAR, there is no better time and no better way to celebrate our organization than to hear Susanne share her perspective in this landmark plenary entitled AAAR's First 40 Years, Its Origins and Evolution by Susanne Herring and Dave Enzer. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Susanne Herring.
Thank you, Cliff, and thank you, AAAR, for this opportunity, and thank you to all of you who are here at the closing talk for this week-long conference. AAAR has meant a lot to me, and I'm sure it has also meant a lot to you. And so let's take a look at this organization and its 40th annual conference. I want to thank Dave Enzer, who was critical in the first 10 years, 15 years of AAAR. I think he didn't miss a board meeting for more than 15 years from the beginning of the organization, and has given me much material for this presentation, as well as the other people named on this slide. Well, oh, this is not working. Do I have to turn this on? Ah, okay. So I can't see my slides. So what I want to talk to you, because it's not possible to give you a comprehensive history of AAAR in this short time, and I don't want to talk too long because I know it's the last talk. What I'm going to focus on is the very early beginnings of AAAR, how it was formed, and what makes and then I want to turn and say, what makes our organization special? How has it engendered such loyalty among not just the founding members, but all those of you who are continuing to make AAAR such a wonderful organization? Something's not there. So 1982, this was an eventful time in the history of aerosol science. It was February 1982 that we held our first conference of the organization in Santa Monica, California. It was also the same year that our journal first appeared. The first issue had been in the works for over a year, and it appeared in the fall of 1982. February 1982, the same month as our conference was held is also the same time that Bill Heinz's book on aerosol technology was first published. I thought this was a rather amazing coincidence. And I say February because his introductory remarks to that first edition are signed February 1982. Why 1982? What was so special about 1982? Well, of course, February is a little bit of a coincidence, but there's the bigger question of what awakened the interest in aerosol science, what were the driving factors behind the formation of the organization, the formation of the journal, as well as the publication of Bill Heinz's book. Well, as Phil Hopke noted in the previous presentation, aerosol science was a little bit more organized in Europe. We had, in 1970, the formation of the Journal of Aerosol Science, and then 10 years ahead of AAAR, there was the formation of the Gesellschaft für Aerosolforschung, which grew out of aerosol technology meetings that had been held in Germany. Whoops, something happened. Come on. But let's, since we're talking about AAAR, the American Association, let's look at the American interest in aerosols. And I wish I could see my slides. There was a number of different fields driving the interest in aerosol science. There was the Atomic Energy Commission, who was interested in radioactive aerosols. We had nuclear weapons. There was concern about what happened with above-ground testing, which was active. There was concern with the emergence of nuclear power and what happens if you have an accident. So this was a big topic of the the Atomic Energy Commission, which was later subsumed into the Department of Energy. There was interest related to that in the toxicology of inhaled particles, and the Inhalation Toxicology Research Institute in Albuquerque was formed by the AEC in 1960 as a result of these interests. There was also interest in toxicology of inhaled particles as a result of smog episodes that was actively being pursued at Harvard University by Mary Amder. There was work in industrial hygiene. And there was the military interest in obscuration smokes. Interestingly, the 1967 Egyptian-Israeli war was critically, the outcome of that war was dependent on obscuration smokes, and the US Army afterwards established a Aerosol Research Center at Edgewood. Then there's always been filtration, which has been ongoing interest in aerosol science, as well as microcontamination as we started to make chips. And then there was air pollution, which emerged as a really large field after the Second World War. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, since it's the field that got me into aerosol science. And this was driven in part by the Clean Air Act, mostly the Clean Air Act of 1970, and the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency. And I want to point out that in 1973, we have the first sort of textbook on aerosols that was written by Thomas Mercer, the person for whom the Mercer Award is named, and this was published in 1973 with support of both the American Industrial Hygiene Association and the Atomic Energy Commission. Okay, smog. So here we have Los Angeles around 1948. The smog problem was so bad that Los Angeles formed the Air Pollution Control District in 1947. And as you can see, the buildings are just obscured by this haze. Well, initially it was thought that this smog was sulfur dioxide because that was what had been associated with the smog events on the East Coast in Denora, and also with the London smog. But Arnold Beckman, a name you may associate with Beckman Instruments, was then serving on a committee for the scientific committee for the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, and he convinced the new head of the Air Pollution Control District that you shouldn't just go out there and control things. You should find out what this smog is. What makes this up? What are the constituents? And that led to the work by Ari Hagenschmidt, who was hired by the district to find out what is in smog. And he identified the peroxy organics, and he also identified aerosols. And you see highlighted here the aerosols formed in these oxidation processes, which he associated with the LA smog. These aerosols are the contributors to the decrease in visibility. But no one did anything about the aerosols. And then we had, in 1969, all right, instigated by Peter Mueller and Ken Whitby and Shel Friedlander, the 1969 Pasadena smog experiment, as it's formally called. Bob Charlson referred to it as the smog caper. And it was not funded by an organization. Instead, these researchers, all of whom we recognize, they came with their own funding and said, let's do our measurements of physical size distribution. Let's do our measurements of aerosol chemistry. Let's do our light scattering measurements all in the same place. And Shel Friedlander hosted the measurements at the Keck Laboratory in Pasadena, and they filled up the basement with their instruments with the sampling line that went to the top. And you can see here Ken Whitby, George Heide, Shel Friedlander, Peter Mueller, Dale Lundgren in the back. And Bob Charlson was also an important part of this study, although he's not in the photo. Jeez. How do I get this to advance reliably? And before I talk about the results of the 69 experiment, I just wanted to show this picture because it's so delightful. Sent to me from Gilsim, the 1972 HX study, which was more of a formal study in a bigger study. And you see Gilsim, a very young Gilsim, on the far right, and next to him is Virgil Marple. And this was a large-scale field project. But let's go back to the 69 smog caper. And we have here a 5-foot-tall mobility column, the Whitby aerosol analyzer. And it was providing aerosol size distributions of the Pasadena smog. And we found here in these early measurements was the emergence of the theory of the bimodal size distribution. And the Pasadena smog experiment also brought the first chemical element mass balance, the beginning of source resolution based on the chemical composition of your aerosol at your receptor site. And we have the chemistry, which Peter Mueller, as head of the Air Industrial Hygiene Lab, spearheaded. And Dave Enzer, then a grad student at the University of Washington, worked with Bob Charlson to take the size distribution data from Ken Whitby and reproduce the nephelometry measurements that Bob Charlson was getting with his 4-wavelength nephelometer. But then the question comes, where do we present these results and where do we publish these results? There wasn't any home for the aerosol science. There was a ACS symposium that was held honoring Milton Kirker in 1971 that was published in the proceedings called Advances of Environmental Science and Technology. It was a book, all right? And then many of these chapters also appeared as individual articles in the Journal of the Colloid and Interface Science, and others here and there in Environmental Science and Technology, Atmospheric Environment, and the Journal of what was then called the Air Pollution Control Association. But there wasn't a place for aerosol research. And similarly, there wasn't really a good place for the presentations. There were aerosol technology meetings that were held annually that were informal. There were about 50 people, 60 people maybe, and the conference was just one session, and people would say, okay, who's going to run next year's conference? They were fun, they were informal, but they were limited. And the only other aerosol conferences were the ECBC, Edgewood conferences that Ed Stubing organized while he directed the Aerosol Center there at Edgewood. But I think perhaps the most important aerosol conference in terms of AAAR is one that was organized by Dave Shaw. And he organized a symposium on aerosol science and technology in New Jersey. It was under the auspices of the American AICHE, the Chemical Engineering Society. And out of that one conference came not one, but 2 books. We have the Aerosol Science, recent developments in aerosol science, the cover of which is shown there because I have a copy. And then there was another one, Fundamentals of Aerosol Science. And both of these appeared in 1978. And they apparently sold quite well. And as a result of the popularity of these books, Dave Shaw was approached to start an aerosol journal. And what he wrote in his introduction to these aerosol volumes, all right, was that much of the aerosol literature lies buried in a wide variety of journals, which specialists in research fields ranging from air pollution to industrial hygiene, nuclear reactor safety, all of this is just spread around. And as a result, he says, researchers find it very time-consuming to keep abreast. If you wanted to stay abreast in aerosol science, you had to go to ACS meetings, AICHE meetings. You know, it was the JAP, Air Pollution Control Association meetings. I mean, how many conferences can you go to? So he was asked to form a journal. And Dave Shaw being Dave Shaw, he then went around and shopped it to a number of publishers. And I don't really know who approached him, but it ended up with Elsevier. And so here we have a picture of the first issue of the Journal of the Aerosol Science and Technology, the name which was chosen by Ben Liu, who felt that we didn't want to have an aerosol journal that started with the word journal, and that it should encompass both science and technology. So this is Ben Liu's title for the journal. And by the time the journal was formed, it was decided that instead of being called the Aerosol Research Association, which was the original name used in the incorporation of the nonprofit association, it should, out of deference to the Europeans, be called the American Association for Aerosol Research. So the first editors, Shaw, Enzer, and Liu, they had 22 board members. And in the editorial that appears in this first issue, which was written by Dave Enzer, it says, why a new journal on aerosols? And it was a need for communication and a forum for research that wasn't currently being published. And that was in part due to a little bit of a backlog of getting things through Journal of Aerosol Science. But we have this unique situation where the journal drove the formation of our society. And there were discussions at the same time. Well, Shel Friedlander says, if there is to be a journal, there needs to be a professional society. And when this was all happening in January 1981, there was a meeting at UCLA, a UCLA short course organized again by Dave Shaw. And there was a luncheon meeting in which I participated with the instructors for that course. And should we form an aerosol society? And I know I advocated for one. And so there was a nonprofit filing in May of 1981 under Aerosol Research Association. and an organizational meeting in July of that year with Shel Friedlander, Ben Liu, Dave Shaw, Dave Enzer, and at that meeting they developed the plans for the first conference to be held at UCLA. So here is a copy of the program from our first conference in 1982, and in the introduction it's saying that the objective of the recently formed society is to promote aerosol research in science and engineering in areas such as industrial processing of aerosols, air pollution, and industrial hygiene. These were the three sort of key fields that they called out in that initial meeting. That meeting had 186 papers and nearly 300 attendees. And there are many people in this room who attended that very first meeting. Maybe I shouldn't ask for a raise of hands, but I could see at least one. And this is an interesting thing. The very first abstract submitted to that conference was submitted by Dave Sinclair, the Dave Sinclair for whom the Sinclair Award is named. And I show here a copy of that abstract. And the opening plenary for our first conference was given by Sheldon Friedlander, and you know, of course, there is the Friedlander Award as well. Other notable plenaries were given by Ken Whitby, talking about his bimodal size distribution, and by Ben Liu, talking about filtration. And the 1982 meeting was followed by a meeting in Maryland, headed by Jim Gentry and Ed Stubing, and then by the first International Aerosol Conference in 1984 in Minneapolis. And these pictures of a very young Dave Puy in the center, Ben Liu and Heinz Fissan, are taken from the photographs in the proceedings of that conference in 1984. And then it was decided to have another international meeting 2 years later in Berlin. And this was held in what was then called West Berlin, headed by Gerhard Israel. And then they moved to a 4-year cycle for the international meetings. And the 1990 Third International Aerosol Conference was held in Kyoto, Japan. And there's the picture of the proceedings from that conference, along with a little sake cup that Dave Enzer was given as part of that conference. The Fuchs Memorial Award was first presented at the 1990 Kyoto Conference, and it's given jointly with AAAR, Gesellschaft für Aerosol Forschung, and the Japanese Association for Aerosol Research. And I have a photo here. It's been given every 4 years since, and this is from 2018. I apologize, I don't have one from this year. But again, just delightful pictures showing Yoshia Otani, Satiris Pratsinas, Urs Baltensberger, Pratim Biswas, Doug Worsnop, and Helmut Horvath. 1994, well, this conference was like a year of my life. Putting together the international conference 4 years later held at UCLA. And here's a picture from the awards luncheon that was presented then. You can see the conference has grown significantly. 670 papers, 757 attendees, 31 different countries represented. And that's in large part due to the efforts of the program chair, Rick Flagan, working with John Seinfeld. Well, organizationally, how did this work? Well, Dave Enzer gave a presentation on the history of AAAR at the Portland meeting, and he identified the first decade is kind of the founder's decade, and he looked at how organizations evolve. And so we have, first of all, the founder's decade, where the meeting organization depended on the host organization. We had a host organization would move from year to year, and whoever was hosting that organization had to handle all the registration, all the venue negotiations, all the details to make the conference run. And but we did have a large board of directors, and I show here a picture because it's provided by Tai Chan that shows many of the directors from those early years: John Seinfeld, Ben Liu, Roger McClellan, Dave Enzer, and Shel Friedlander. The early years in this founder's decade brought some interesting advances that are still with us today. We instituted the tutorial program, and Dick Dobbins, when he was head of the education committee, took the tutorial program under the wing of the education committee. He also, as part of his efforts with that committee, saw to the publication of Fuchs' book on the mechanics of aerosols by Dover. And Ben Liu sacrificed his own personal copy of that book to be the book from which the images were taken for that Dover publication of the mechanics of aerosols. Gil Sim from TSI was critical in getting industrial involvement and the instrumentation company's involvement with AAAR. And in 1987, we have the first listing of exhibitors in our conference program. And in 1988, we have the organizational sponsor program is fully launched, and that was basically drafted by Gil Sim. Other events that were important, in 1987, Ben Liu, as president of the organization, established the working groups. And I remember there was a conference dinner, and Ben Liu just says, we're going to establish these working groups, and here are the people that are going to lead these different groups. Well, at the following conference, we have Pete McMurray was charged with organizing the '89 technical program, and he says, I'm going to use these people from the working groups, because when the working groups were founded, people who were in charge of it said, well, what am I supposed to do? And Pete solved that. He made the working groups critical to the technical programs of our conferences. And we have, again, a collection of pictures from Ty. In the top, Laura Gundel, Beverly, Cohen, Dave Pui, Ty. In the middle is Joan Daisy. And at the bottom, Walter John, myself, Rick, and Jim Davis. Well, soon, actually at Dave Enzer's prodding, we moved towards a more formal sort of running of AAAR. And we established at RTI, where Dave was, a home office for the organization. We had in 1986, well, actually appeared in '87, covering the '86-'87 membership, our first membership directory. And we established that same year the first regularly published AAAR newsletter. And it started off with just called the newsletter, and then it sort of transformed to AAAR News. Well, Tai Chan, when he was head of the publications committee, decided we needed a better name, and he held a contest. The winner of that contest was Tony Wexler, and we have particulars. The next approximately decade, these are not rough, exactly 10-year periods, but in the next period, the organization grew to be a little more formal. And I think a really critical thing was the adoption of new bylaws, and this was spearheaded by Roger McClellan. Up until that point, the AAAR board was kind of self-appointed, and they would elect the officers. This is very typical of any fledgling organization, where you have a closed group of people who are trusted, who kind of run it like an oligarchy. But Roger saw that the organization needed to grow, needed to get out of that model. And so with 1990, with the adoption of the new bylaws, we have direct election of board members and officers of the organization by the membership. 1992, AAAR gained the copyright to its journal. And this came about as a result of the fact that it was time to renegotiate the contract with Elsevier. And instead of engaging it with or arranging that contract with a for-profit branch of AAAR, it was brought back to the nonprofit AAAR, and the legal team that worked with John Seinfeld to make this happen said, if the AAAR nonprofit is to have a journal, it can't contract for somebody else to own the copyright. It has to be owned by AAAR. And with that ammunition, John Seinfeld got Elsevier to agree to grant AAAR the copyright to its own journal. This was really significant in our organization. What should we do? It skipped on me. I can't. This is not working. Okay. I wanted to move on to our strategic plan. And Pat Cady, I remember when she joined the board in 1993, she says, this organization needs a strategic plan. There's no strategic plan. She wrote the first strategic plan. And AAAR has followed this ever since, and with Akia writing and updating that strategic plan just this last year. We also, in 93, went away from the model of individual host organizations running the conference, and we engaged professional management services. In 1993, that was ACGIH. And in 95, at Pete McMurray's suggestion, we codified policies and procedures that were published in the directory. And again, because I like old photos, this is just a photograph from the winter board meeting held in 1992. And you can see here Bev Cohen, Walter John, Pete McMurray, Rick Flagan, Joyce Penner, Sue Larson, myself, Bill Hines, Cliff Davidson, Dave Pui, and in the back row, Suchi Ye, John Brock, Dave Enzer, I guess Rick counted as the back row there, Tom Peterson, Doug Cooper, John Seinfeld, Jim Davis, and Roger McClellan, and Tai Chan. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next sort of part of my talk, and that is, in what ways is the culture of AAAR unique? And Dave Enzer, in his history that was presented at the 2001 conference, he said it's unique, well, the high technical quality of its journal and its conferences, and he then names the involvement of students, the positioning of women in leadership positions, a diversity of disciplines, and innovation. Now, this was 20 years ago, and I think we're very much on this same course. Women in leadership roles, I want to call out Joan Daisy, who was the first woman to join the board of AAAR. This was in 1985, 3 years after the organization was founded. The following year, I became a member of the board. She became secretary. And this was quickly followed by Chris Sloan, Bev Cohen, Sue Larson, Sonia Kreidenweiss, Joyce Penner, Pat Cady, Janet Walker, and there's not time, it seems like, to go through everybody, but currently more than 50% of our board is women, or at least that's of the count as of Monday. I don't know for the new board. Culture of AAAR, the involvement of students. And Dave Enzer, when I spoke to him, he says, yes, you know, AAAR didn't have just a noontime business meeting for students who happened to come to a conference. They were integrated with the conference, and this happened from the very beginning. And the reduced cost for students is something that happened at the very beginning. You will be amused by this page from the 1982 conference program that the conference fees for students were $40 compared to $80 for a regular participant, and membership was $5. We soon established the student assistant program, student travel grants, and student chapters have emerged in the last, I would say, 20 years. The discounted fees for students have continued at every conference. This is from the '89 conference in Reno, and you can see that the student rate was $55 and included a copy of the journal. At this conference, we have roughly 740 participants, I'm told, and roughly 1/3 of the participants are students. And so I had an interesting question arose in my mind. How many of those who come here as students continue to participate in AAAR? Well, this is not a number you can trace through the membership, but I thought, oh, I can survey the board. So last week, I wrote an email to all the board members and said, did you come to AAAR first as a student? And the answer is 67% of our board came to AAAR first as a student. I think this is quite remarkable. And I had this enthusiastic response from Sally Eng, who said, yes, I grew up in AAAR. I attended my first AAAR in 2003 in Anaheim when I was a second-year graduate student. I have only missed one AAAR since. And then there is a quote from John Seinfeld in Particulars in 1992 when he was president. And he says, with the flow of superb young members into AAAR, we are assured of strong leadership for the association for many years to come. And I think this has been key. And so let's come to today and innovation with AAAR. And I am just amazed myself as an old timer with AAAR at the innovation that keeps on happening with this organization. The mentoring program that was just started this year by Leah, the International Professional Travel Grant Program, the undergraduate day at the conference. We had, I don't know if many of you are aware, but local undergraduates came for one day here to the conference. There was a science communication program that Cliff organized. And the AAAR lecture series, which I find absolutely astounding. These are web-posted lectures that features a high-impact paper selected by the editors of our journal, and it's presented by the author live in a webinar style monthly to one of the student chapters. And then the video is published on our website and open to the public. And apparently the student chapters just clamor to be able to be a host. I wanted to note that IKEA has done a good job with our ongoing strategic planning, and I think this is important to the innovation that AAAR continues to bring to the not just to the discipline of aerosol science, but to the communication of the results that we find and how they matter to society. I think it's also important to realize that AAAR is one of many organizations, aerosol societies throughout the world. And I put together this timeline that roughly starts from 1972 on the left to the present day on the far right. We have the GAF formed in 1972. Nordic countries formed a sort of informal society in 78. AAAR in 82. And then after that, starting in '83, there's just huge numbers of aerosol societies formed. The ones circled in blue are those that belong to the European Aerosol Association. The ones in green belong to the Asian Aerosol Assembly. The dotted line represents those that belong to the International AAAR, International Aerosol Research Assembly. So with that, I just want to summarize. AAAR was formed initially due to the rapid growth, really, of aerosol research in the years following the Second World War. And it's represented diverse fields: industrial hygiene, radioactive aerosols, obscuration smokes. These are popular topics in the beginning, as air pollution has been an ongoing topic. Filtration, microcontamination, pharmacology, bioaerosols, which of course has blossomed with COVID. AAAR's journal and conference are a home for all of these diverse fields. It's where we can interact among one another on fundamentals of aerosols that apply to all of these areas. And I think what is unique about our organization and makes us all so loyal to this organization is the culture, the encouragement of students, the involvement of students, and the involvement of everyone in leadership positions, and the innovations in communications of aerosol science, and our collaborations with other international collaborations with aerosol associations around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susanne, for an outstanding perspective on our association. We have time for a few questions. There are microphones set up in each aisle. So if you have a question for Susanne, please approach the microphone, and also please identify yourself. Okay, Roger.
I'm Roger McClellan. I could be readily identified because I guess I was the tallest guy at that first meeting in Santa Monica, and unless somebody challenges me later, I'm probably the tallest guy here. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I liked the strong historical orientation. My roots are anchored when I moved to Richland, Washington, home of the Hanford nuclear site, in 1944. And January 5th, 1945, a document was released called the Radiation Protection Program for Hanford. And then along the way, I attended a seminar as a student intern, and it was a wonderful individual who was a Nobel laureate, Dr. Seaborg. And I visited with him afterwards. He was open to students. And later I worked under him at the Atomic Energy Commission, and he encouraged me to go to New Mexico. He said, I think I recall over lunch you said you knew something about plutonium. I happened to discover that, you know. And so I think this interaction between students, but I want to emphasize something. It's important for us to have a open boundary. Do not let the AAAR become a silo. We need to be open, and in that regard, about the same time course, another group started, the Society for Risk Analysis. And I think that we, as I those who may have seen my presentation, I had a schematic at the end. Sources, exposure, dose, adverse outcomes, over and above those occurring from other factors. That paradigm is something that we are heavy on the left-hand side, but I want the people in this group, particularly students, become more knowledgeable of the world, broad world of health, because a lot of what we do impacts into that world. So again, I like the fact that we have togetherness, but we also need to celebrate outreach to others. So my assignment to each one of you students is, if you're in an engineering program and building, check it out. Do you have a medical school? Check out their seminar program. Be so bold as to go over to that foreign institution and hobnob with some students there. They will gain from you, and you'll gain from them. Thank you very much, and thank you, Susanne, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for your comments, Roger.
Thank you, Roger. Do we have other questions or comments? Subu.
Thank you, Susanne, for that wonderful talk. I got at least a couple of questions. You can pick either one. Can you tell us something more about how you came into the field? Or, we also host the International Aerosol Conference. So a little bit about how AAAR got into that. So either one.
How I personally got into the field, I was a student in physics, and I enjoyed that as a discipline for study. I love the fundamentals, but I didn't want to do it as a career. And I was, at that point, the first time I'd lived in the city, it was Seattle. And by my standards, Seattle's air was awful. And I knew that Seattle was good it was considered clean. And I'm thinking, if this is clean, geez, what must the rest of the other cities look like? I didn't want to breathe that dirty air. And so I started looking into doing a postdoc on something related to air pollution. And I soon found that the only part of air pollution that had any physics in it were aerosols. And Bob Charlson, who invented the nephelometer, introduced me to Shel Friedlander. This was by mail, of course, and told me, here's some papers that he's written. I read the papers. I drafted the letter, sent it to Sheldon, and he writes back and says, I have several positions open. Send some information about yourself. And Bob Charlson was one of the ones writing a reference letter for me. So my career started in my postdoc for Shel Friedlander at Caltech. But it was an interest in air pollution and the fact that I still needed to do something that involved physics and not organic chemistry, which was not my strength.
Great, thank you, Subu. Are there any other questions? Okay, Lupita, yes.
You couldn't see me, I'm so small. Actually, yeah, I was very interested in the aspect of students, because I think we might have missed a very important landmark along the way, which was the establishment of the Young Investigators, later to be known as the Early Career Standing Committee, which is now the source of our many activities for young people. And I know I worked on that project with Cliff, so maybe Cliff can help us remember when we finally got it officially become a standing committee, because that has been, I think, the source of continuity for our society. And also, it took quite a bit of time to do it. So I would like to know exactly when we finally got it done.
Wow. Gosh, Lupita, I would like to be able to answer that, but I can't remember. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Actually, because I just wanted to know whether Sally Ann was able to get the benefits of it, because that was the goal when we were going through this process. So because it was quite a while ago, all I can say.
Quite a while ago.
You'll have to ask Sally that. You have one more question here.
Okay, one more question. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a silly question, but thank you very much for the kind presentation. My name is Kapiamba from the University of Miami. Since you were there from the beginning, I'm curious to know what motivated the logo of AAAR. I see the lines, why not the dots, and the choice of colors? Do you have an idea?
I can tell you what the rumor was, or what I was told back in 1982, and that is the logo came from the graphic artists at Elsevier. And I don't know what information that graphic artist was given to develop the logo, but I can tell you that when Virg Marple saw this logo, he said, aerosol science is really about impactors.
Terrific. Great. Okay, well, join me in thanking Susanne one more time.